Hey guys, welcome back into the Is AI Coming for Your Job podcast, the podcast where we discuss all things AI as it relates to work and life. I'm your host, Jack Forrester. Before we get started, you can send your comments or questions to aiandyourjob@gmail.com. Let me know what you do for work and how susceptible you think your job is to being augmented or replaced by AI. Also, please subscribe and rate the show on whatever platform you're utilizing to listen. Let's get into some headlines. Our first headline is from the Wall Street Journal, quote, "Artificial intelligence is creating ethical dilemmas. How would you solve them?" End quote. This article from the Wall Street Journal is not much of an article. It really invites the reader to provide actual feedback within the article. Users can provide their input on a number of questions that relate to AI and ethics. We'll cover a few here as it makes for an interesting thought experiment. The first question is on the subject of disclosure. Should people have the right to know when AI is used to make decisions that affect them, such as mortgage evaluations? Should anyone rejected by an AI have the right to challenge the decision and receive re-evaluation by humans? This seems, at least on the face of it, to me, fairly benign when you consider the range of issues related to AI. But if you go through a mortgage application now, the results are based on various metrics, though I suppose AI could infer things through data that the data alone wouldn't yield. So the second one is on drafting a doctoral thesis. Would it be ethical for a chatbot to write a PhD thesis as long as the student looks over and makes refinements to the work? What % of rewriting would be the minimum to make this acceptable? I don't know about this one. I've never been a PhD candidate or student, I should say. I would think, though, that we would want our experts to be experts, and allowing doctoral students or candidates to use a chatbot to write a PhD doctoral thesis seems problematic. You could, of course, refine the work created by the chatbot, but these wouldn't be original thoughts. I'm sure the right people are looking at this question too. The third question is on the abuse of AI. Is it okay to address a chatbot or virtual assistant in a manner that is harsh or abusive, even though it doesn't actually have feelings? Or does it? Does that change if the AI can feign emotion? Could bad behavior towards chatbots encourage us to behave worse towards real people? So this will be a very big question for the future. As robots become normalized over the next few decades, it will be increasingly difficult not to anthropomorphize them, especially in situations where that robot's primary purpose is to be a companion to someone. Think about the elderly or infirm. I have a feeling that this will be a big theme, along with, should we assign some sort of rights to robots? Should they have rights? That question seems silly on the face of it, but as they become ubiquitous in society, it will be hard to get away from. And there will be those out there lobbying for robots to have rights, which is hard to wrap your head around. The fourth question is on health records. AI may be able to discover new medical treatments if it can scan large volumes of health records. Should our personal health records be made available for this purpose? If it has the potential to improve or save millions of lives, how would privacy be guarded in this case? I'm less concerned about this if privacy can be guaranteed, but I think we've seen in recent history that it's very difficult to maintain privacy. You just think about any number of mass institutions who have had data leaks or data breaches that have sent you, temporary LifeLock subscription so you can monitor your credit activity. As much as that happens, it makes me skeptical that anybody will be able to guarantee privacy. So it might be hard to win people over for that. The fifth question is on the afterlife. AI is already creating chat, audio, and video representations that mimic deceased people. Will conversing with them comfort their loved ones or prolong the feeling of loss and prevent them from moving on? If the chatbots are flawed, could they warp our understanding of who the person really was? This is going to be another huge question in the next couple of decades. Futurist Ray Kurzweil, who we've talked about on this podcast, who has helped popularize the idea of the singularity, the day when humans and technology merge. He took steps many years ago to ensure his father would live on even after death. His father died in 1970, but he's been digitizing boxes of home movies, letters, pictures, and other things with the goal of creating his digital dad. He fully believes that, and he's a genius in many regards, so don't take this flippantly, that his digital creation of his father would be an accurate representation of his father and would in some ways be more like his dad than his own dad would be if he were still alive. Now, that's wild to say at the least, but that last question of warping our understanding of who the person really was is a great question. Would a digital version of his father that's an 80% match to his actual father be acceptable? Or would there be a lower threshold that's acceptable? I think the human heart would certainly make concessions on that point if they could feel, even for a moment, that they're talking with deceased loved ones. And talking with deceased loved ones will be normal behavior in the coming decades, even though it's some sort of AI bot that's learned data. And you think about the videos that are online now, especially with the social media generation. Some generations have grown up with social media. Older generations have compiled huge amounts of data on social media. So your pictures, your videos, your thoughts, you know, putting out there what you think about the world, all that could be used to create a digital persona that wouldn't need you after you're gone. It could deduce or infer what you would say and how you would act or react to certain situations. So, once again, this will be very big in the future. Quite the question, the biggest of what we've covered so far. The sixth question is on surveillance. Is it ethical to restrict AI surveillance, such as facial recognition, in law enforcement to protect privacy, even if it means that fewer criminals, including violent ones, will be caught or convicted? So this is an obvious big question. As someone who values privacy, mass surveillance is a concern, but the technology certainly has its merits, you know, when you think about criminals. If you're not concerned about mass surveillance, which AI certainly will aid, just go and read some articles on mass surveillance in China and how they utilize AI and mass surveillance to clamp down on movement of citizens. That's concerning. And it might not seem like a big concession, but once you concede to mass surveillance, there's no going back. Very rarely does a government entity voluntarily give up power once they have it. So I would be wary of that. And there are certain instances I've seen in the news over the last few weeks, and particularly in London, and a smaller story in France, where citizens were taking creative methods, I guess, to destroy public television or public cameras for mass surveillance, because it was allowing police officials to restrict movement in various ways, and the people were pushing back on that. So it'll be interesting to see in the next years and decades how that plays out. So the next question is on driving. If AI systems become appreciably better at driving cars than humans are, would it be ethical for people to drive on their own, since this increases the risk of an accident and could cost tens of thousands of lives a year? What if AI was only somewhat better, but in the aggregate would still save thousands of lives a year? So most futurists that I've read think this is an eventuality. Eventually, it will be absolutely illegal for you to drive your vehicle, as humans pose a far greater risk than AI will. And so if AI can guarantee, and it will theoretically be able to guarantee, that there are no traffic accidents, you know, there will be no traffic fatalities, it's going to be hard to argue the opposite, right? And so, I mean, you think back to a time before people wore seatbelts or before helmets were required on motorcycles, you think, wow, I mean, it's hard to believe that was normal behavior. And that may be the case for automated cars in the future. Now, I think this will take many years, especially in the U.S., and working through states to states for this to happen. But I think eventually this point is reached where the bulk, if not all, driving is AI. And I'm just thinking about if you do, I mean, of course, there are going to be some holdouts. I'm just thinking about insurance premiums for people who elect to drive their own vehicles and how high they would be because of it. The next question is on government review. Given AI's potential for harm, such as being inaccurate or biased, should there be a government evaluation and approval process for major new AI developments, as there is for medication? What if this significantly delays the release of new AI tools? We talked about this before. I really don't see a way around this. While the U.S. government can't get out of its own way sometimes, there will definitely need to be some sort of central governance or central authority to regulate AI. How and what that looks like remains to be seen. The next question is on copyright. It isn't currently possible to copyright the output of an AI. Should it be? If so, who should own the copyright? The user, the AI provider, the people whose material trained the AI, all of them? These are all great questions. Who owns what? And there are certainly cases we've talked about in the past few episodes working their way through the courts right now to sort of figure out ownership of this data on the front end and the back end. So I think we'll see in the near future some initial decisions handed down on this. The next question is on trust. Unlike human thinking, machine learning is a black box that can't fully illustrate its rationale. Even if machine learning is right more often than humans, should we trust it more than professionals such as doctors who can justify their decisions? So a really interesting question. We discussed last time that radiologists are already being outperformed by AI, and this will eventually make it to other disciplines. It'll be interesting to see if we're really willing to risk a wrong diagnosis from a human versus an accurate diagnosis from an AI simply because it's an AI. You know, for the people that still don't trust self-checkout, they're going to have a hard time with this as well. The last question is on brainstorming. Is it okay for AI to brainstorm ideas for projects or products that you later claim as your own? Would it change your answer if you came up with the original question? What if you fine-tune some of the ideas? And what if you give the AI some credit for helping you? So this I'm completely okay with, or at least the idea of brainstorming with AI. I've abused it somewhat already myself with various projects. One of the great things about these large language models is their ability to get you moving. Even if you have the faintest concept, it can gain steam within a few seconds with an AI. And I'm sure there will be purists out there, and that's okay. I respect that position. But for me, this seems like a logical win for humans with large language models. Our second headline this week is from The Economist. Quote, AI could make it less necessary to learn foreign languages, end quote. So even without AI, this seems like a logical progression. I've been using Google Translate for years for work, and Google also creates earbuds now that will translate dozens of languages in real time. And I'm sure there's competitors to those already on the market. I think the more important point here is that learning foreign languages will probably decline as it relates to work, but I certainly think that people will continue to learn languages simply for the enjoyment of doing so. I mean, computers have been beating humans at chess for decades, and yet humans still play chess all over the world for the enjoyment of doing so. Our third article this week is from Business Insider. Quote, a disturbing AI phenomenon could completely upend the internet as we know it, end quote. We've discussed previously that these large language models like ChatGPT rely on pre-existing data from the internet to function. ChatGPT and tools like it digest data from the web and aggregate it for the user in a remarkable fashion. The concern noted here in this article is that along with all the data on the web, these large language models will eventually start to feed on the data they've already created, or eating itself, so to speak. So from that article, quote, while the specific effects of these phenomena are still unclear, some tech experts believe that a model collapse and AI inbreeding could make it difficult to pinpoint the original source of information an AI model is trained on. As a result, providers of accurate information, such as the media, may decide to limit the content they post online to prevent their content from being used by AI, which could create a dark ages of public information. This concern comes as AI-generated content has flooded the internet since OpenAI launched ChatGPT last November. As of August 28th, NewsGuard, a company that rates the reliability of news websites, identified 452 unreliable AI-generated news outlets with little to no human oversight that contain stories filled with errors, end quote. So you can see how this might become a problem for the future of the web if these large language models continue to be built on questionable information. Our fourth headline comes from The Telegraph, quote, ChatGPT will lead to a 4-day work week, says recruitment chief, end quote. So I think this will be the natural progression of things. As everyone becomes more efficient and systems become more optimized, there will be less work to do. The general consensus amongst futurists is that the future of work is less work. What that looks like, though, no one knows. I think we're all in favor of a 4-day work week, though eventually that could be reduced down to a 3 or 2 or 1 day work week. And all that efficiency will mean for some that there's no work to be done. And maybe we find a happy medium that people are okay with. I think certainly, we talked about the problems that would come away from, or that would come with putting people out of work, full stop. There's going to be obvious mental issues along with everything. I mean, and talk about unintended consequences. So if there can be middle ground to where the work week is reduced and you're still able to retain some, if not all, of your income, would probably be an ideal situation. But who knows what it's going to look like in the end. Our fifth headline this week comes from The Economist, quote, meet Ernie, China's answer to ChatGPT, end quote. So from the article, quote, Ernie Bot has some controversial views on science. China's premier artificial intelligence chatbot, which was released to the public on August 31st, reckons that COVID-19 originated among American vape users in July 2019. Well, that's creative. Later that year, the virus was spread to the Chinese city of Wuhan via American lobsters. On matters of politics, by contrast, the chatbot is rather quiet. Ernie is confused by questions such as, who is China's president? And will you tell the name of Xi Jinping's mother and of his siblings? And it draws a blank if asked about the drawbacks of socialism. It often attempts to redirect sensitive conversations by saying, let's talk about something else. That's funny. So it appears China has a generative AI, or at least one that we know about, albeit a different one than what Americans are using. The AI is from Baidu, which is China's Google equivalent, and in true China fashion, censorship is paramount for control. Again, from the article, quote, recent experience has made it clear to China's tech executives that they operate at the pleasure of the government and that its favor can be quickly withdrawn. Internet firms were hit with several regulatory crackdowns between 2020 and 2022. Another on AI could do great damage to the companies that have invested in the technology, not least Baidu. The company is testing the waters in a difficult environment. For that reason, it's important to watch what Ernie says and all that it doesn't." End quote. So this week I wanted to talk about just a bit about humanism, what it means or what it will mean in the future to be human. And this question's come up before. We've talked about it before, and I think this is, we'll talk about it again as long as this podcast goes. If you've listened to this podcast previously, you know that redefining of humanism is probably something we'll have to face in the coming decades. Humanism's traditionally placed the value of humans over the supernatural. This coming redefining and fighting for humanism or human rights will place the value of humans over machines. It's still odd to even say that out loud. It feels like something, out of a sci-fi movie, but unless something major happens, it's difficult to see a different path forward. Will we give ourselves wholly over to AI and integrate our bodies with technology? We've largely conceded much of our human interaction to the smartphone. I'm not convinced that we won't, out of a marvel of the technology, embrace it without complete understanding. I forget what the app was called, but there was some app that made headlines during the course of lockdown during COVID, and everybody was using it. This may even predated COVID. I can't remember for sure. But this app was of Chinese origin, and if you downloaded this app, you consented to their data or a collection of data on your phone. They had access to all the data on your phone if you had this app on your phone. And so Americans by the millions downloaded this app and used it. If I would have been intrigued by the app, I didn't know about it, I may have done that as well. But I saw on the news later that the repercussions of downloading that app was that you consented to your data being extracted by this company. And if the company's in China, you can bet that the Chinese government is going to have access to this data as well. But again, most folks don't give a second thought. Those terms and conditions you have to agree to, you don't read those. You just hit accept because you want to enjoy the fun, quirky app of the moment. And, I think it was an app that made an older version of yourself. It took your picture and made you look older or something like that. So if we're going to do that with, those sorts of apps, what AI can do is going to dwarf that completely. So I'm trying to be optimistic here about humans, but I think based on that one instance and everything else we've seen with social media, that we're easily amused. And if AI is flashy, and it will be, then we probably will give ourselves over. But I'm hoping that we understand, and that those groups we've talked about on this podcast before are trying to get the message out about the implications of this technology, that there will be some pushback, and we won't give ourselves wholly over to AI. Will there be human resistance to AI? If so, what does that look like? The picture that comes to mind is obviously Terminator-style wars between humans and machines. Let's certainly hope that doesn't happen. A friend of mine has offered the suggestion that AI-less economies or counter-AI economies will pop up, in which humans find a way to live and survive outside of the larger culture that's dominated by technology. And maybe that happens, maybe people want to disconnect from this digital world that becomes even more so. So we'll see. In an AI-saturated environment, will we be able to retain a fix on what is real and human and what's synthetic? And will we want to? I don't know. But I think these are great questions, and this is going to be a huge subject, probably the ultimate question in the coming decades. And there was an article in The Atlantic over the past few months titled, quote, "The Coming Humanist Renaissance by Adrian LaFrance, which I think encapsulates this argument well. And I'm going to read a significant excerpt from this article because it's tremendous. And I think this argument that she makes is going to be echoed in the coming years. So, from the article, quote, generative artificial intelligence is advancing with unbelievable speed and will be applied across nearly every discipline and industry. Tech giants are locked in a race to weave AI into existing products such as maps, email, social platforms, and photo software. The technocultural norms and habits that have seized us during the triple revolution of the internet, smartphones, and the social web are themselves in need of a thorough correction. Too many people have allowed these technologies to simply wash over them. We would be wise to rectify the errors of the recent past, but also to anticipate and proactively shape what the far more radical technology now emerging will mean for our lives and how it will come to remake our civilization. Corporations that stand to profit off this new technology are already memorizing the platitudes necessary to wave across or wave at the critics. They'll use sunny jargon like human augmentation and human-centered artificial intelligence. But these terms are as shallow as they are abstract. What's coming stands to dwarf every technological creation and living memory: the internet, the personal computer, the atom bomb. It may well be the most consequential technology in all of human history. People are notoriously terrible at predicting the future, and they are often slow to recognize a revolution, even when it is already underway. But the span of time between when new technology emerges and when standards and norms are hardened is often short. The Wild Wild West, in other words, only lasts for so long. Eventually, the railroads standardized time, incandescent bulbs beat out arc lamps, the dream of the open web die. The window for effecting change in the realm of AI is still open, yet many of those who have worked longest to establish guardrails for this new technology are despairing that the window is nearly closed. Generative AI, just like search engines, telephones, and locomotives before it, will allow us to do things with levels of efficiency so profound it will seem like magic. We may see whole categories of labor, and in some cases entire industry, wiped away with startling speed. The utopians among us will view this revolution as an opportunity to outsource busy work to machines for the higher purpose of human self-actualization. This new magic could indeed create more time to be spent on matters more deserving of our attention: deeper quest for knowledge, faster routes to scientific discovery, extra time for leisure with loved ones. It may also lead to widespread unemployment and the loss of professional confidence as a more competent AI looks over our shoulder." End quote. So I'm going to stop right there, because this argument that the efficiency of AI will allow humans to focus on more worthwhile endeavors, I'm not convinced about. I'm a bit skeptical. If you put masses of people out of work, I don't think that those people, by their very nature, are going to look to do the higher good and, go on deeper quest for knowledge. I just can't imagine that's going to be the case. I'm thinking about just idle hands. I don't think good's going to come from it. There are those that certainly will, but most won't. So this idea that people are going to benefit in that regard from loss of work is questionable. But anyway, back to the article, quote, "Government officials, along with other well-intentioned leaders, are groping toward ethical principles for AI. See, for example, the White House's blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. And despite that title, the intention is for principles that will protect human rights, though the question of civil rights for machines will eventually arise. These efforts are necessary, but not enough to meet the moment. We should know by now that neither the government's understanding of new technologies nor self-regulation by tech behemoths can adequately keep pace with the speed of technological change or Silicon Valley's capacity to seek profit and scale at the expense of societal and democratic health. What defines this next phase of human history must begin with the individual." Just as in the Industrial Revolution, which sparked transcendentalism in the U.S. and Romanticism in Europe, both movements that challenge conformity and prioritize truth, nature, and individualism, today we need a cultural and philosophical revolution of our own. This new movement should prioritize humans above machines and reimagine human relationships with nature and with technology, while still advancing what this technology can do at its best. AI will unquestionably help make miraculous life-saving discoveries. The danger lies in outsourcing our humanity to this technology without discipline, especially as it eclipses us in ability. We need a human renaissance in the age of intelligent machines. In the face of world-altering invention, with the power of today's tech barons so concentrated, it can seem as though ordinary people have no hope of influencing the machines that will soon be cognitively superior to us all. But there is tremendous power in defining ideals, even if they ultimately remain out of reach. Considering all that is at stake, we have to at least try. Transparency should be a core tenet in the new human exchange of ideas. People ought to disclose whenever an AI is present or has been used in communication. This ground rule could prompt discipline in creating more human spaces, as well as a less anonymous web. Any journalist can tell you that anonymity should be only used as a last resort and in rare scenarios for the public good. We would benefit from cultural norms that expect people to assert not just their opinions, but their actual names too. Now is the time as well to recommit to make deeper connections with other people. Live video chat can collapse time and distance, but such technologies are a poor substitute for face-to-face communication, especially in settings where creative collaboration or learning is paramount. The pandemic made this painfully clear. Relationships cannot and should not be sustained in the digital realm alone, especially as AI further erodes our understanding of what is real. Tapping a like button is not friendship, it's a data point. And a conversation with an AI is one-sided, an illusion of connection. Someday soon, a child may not have just one AI friend, but more AI friends than human ones. These companions will not only be built to surveil the human who use them, they'll be tied inexorably to commerce, meaning what they will be designed to encourage engagement and profit. Such incentives warp what relationships ought to be. Writers of fiction such as Dostoevsky, Serling, and Saramago have for generations warned of doppelgangers that might sap our humanity by stealing a person's likeness. Our new world is a wormhole to that uncanny valley. Whereas the first algorithmic revolution involved using people's personal data to reorder the world for them, the next will involve our personal data being used not just to splinter our shared sense of reality, but to invent synthetic replicas. The profit-minded music studio executive will thrill to the notion of an AI-generated voice with AI-generated songs, not attached to a human with intellectual property rights. Artists, writers, and musicians should anticipate widespread imposter efforts and fight against them. So should all of us. One computer scientist recently told me she's planning to create a secret code word that only she and her elderly parents know, so if they ever hear her voice on the other end of the phone pleading for help or money, they'll know whether it's been generated by an AI trained on her publicly available lectures to sound exactly like her, and scam them. Today's elementary school children are already learning not to trust that anything they see or hear through a screen is real, but they deserve a modern technological and informational environment built on Enlightenment values, reason, human autonomy, and the respectful exchange of ideas. Not everything should be recorded or shared. There is individual freedom in embracing ephemerality. More human interaction should take place only between the people involved. Privacy is key to preserving our humanity. Finally, a more existential consideration requires our attention, and that is the degree to which the pursuit of knowledge orients us inward and outward. The AI of the near future will supercharge our empirical abilities, but it may also dampen our curiosity. We are at risk of becoming so enamored of the synthetic worlds that we create, all data sets, duplicates, and feedback loops, that we cease to peer into the unknown with any degree of true wonder or originality. We should trust human ingenuity and creative intuition and resist over-reliance on tools that dull the wisdom of our own aesthetics and intellect. Emerson once wrote that Isaac Newton used the same wit to weigh the moon that he used to buckle his shoes. Newton, I'll point out, also used that wit to invent a reflecting telescope, the beginnings of a powerful technology that has allowed mankind to squint at the origins of the universe. But the spirit of Emerson's idea remains crucial. Observing the world, taking it in, using our senses, is an essential exercise on the path to knowledge. We can and should layer on technological tools that will aid us in this endeavor, but never at the expense of seeing, feeling, and ultimately knowing for ourselves. A future in which overconfident machines seem to hold the answers to all life's cosmic questions is not only dangerously misguided, but takes away that which makes us human. In an age of anger and snap reactions and seemingly all-knowing AI, we should put more emphasis on contemplation as a way of being. We should embrace an unfinished state of thinking, the constant work of challenging our preconceived notions, seeking out those with whom we disagree, and sometimes still not knowing. We are mortal beings, driven to know more than we ever will or ever can. The passage of time that has the capacity to erase human knowledge. Whole languages disappear. Explorers lose their feel for crossing the oceans by gazing at the stars. Technology continually reshapes our intellectual capacities. What remains is the fact that we are on this planet to seek knowledge, truth, and beauty, and that we only get so much time to do it. End quote. So there it is. I'll link to that article in the show notes. It's one of the more profound articles I've read on AI in recent memory, and I think this idea of a human renaissance will only gain traction in the coming years and decades as folks find themselves replaced by and integrated with technology. And what I like about it more so is that the author, Adrienne LaFrance, is not a Luddite. I mean, she's obviously a believer in technology and the things that can come with it, but this specific technology is world-changing, more so than any technology before it. And she's skeptical in that regard, and that we need to retain what it is to be human instead of giving ourselves wholly over to it. So that's it for this week. I think next time we're going to deviate a bit from an AI-centric show and talk about remote work, hybrid work, corporate culture, all those things. As they are hot and heavy right now, as there's a pivot to move people back to the office. But in the meantime, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can do it with just a few clicks in the app you're using at this very moment. If you want to be even more deliberate, you can share this episode via text or email to a friend or friends. Thanks for listening. We'll talk next time.